Right. Dan, thanks. Good afternoon. It's probably about 1:15, and seems like a couple of weeks since we've done one of these chats, and quite a lot happened. But first and foremost, congratulations for everybody here at for Chitra. Good win yesterday.
Thanks, Craig. It was very good. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, nice filly. Her and Arishka have done plenty of work together over the last sort of 12 months and things, so that they're kind of progressing in their respective ranks, and they're very similarly rated, and almost a question whether one day they might have to meet on a racetrack, but we'll try and avoid that where we can. So Chitra's always, she's all her racing's been over 6, or winning certainly has been over 6. Whether Richard got off her yesterday and said, "Oh, I'm sure she'd cope with going back to 5," and it possibly looked like that. Bizarrely, she's bred to stay a lot further. Anyway, pedigree isn't always everything.
She hit the line very well yesterday. Visibly. Not that I'd argue with Richard Kingscourt, and I've never studied Chitra's form as closely as what you would have done, but looks as though 6 or even further would have been the way to go. But we'll never see. I think if they have to run against each other, at least we'll have plenty of badges.
Yeah, true. But no, I think I don't really like running horses against each other, though we did do it earlier in the week But that was a maiden, one horse needing a run to get a mark, and another one, quite a nice filly, who ran well and finished second. So that was a slightly different scenario. But certainly, once you get into handicaps, the idea when you're running is to win. And if you've got 2 horses, then surely one of them has a better chance than the other. But
yeah. So after looking back at the Windsor race, and I think it's obviously takes a little bit of a crossover time to go from. With the run on a Monday and then it being the following Tuesday before you get the handicap mark, but she's being raised £1. The pound she's being raised has been taken off Born to Finish because he's being dropped £1 for his run, which is cracking news on another line. But it does put her at 73, which has made 0 to 70s no longer an option. So what's your thoughts for the next couple of options?
So the programme book's pretty simple, really. There's one 0 to 75 red car on the 27th of this month, which is a bank holiday Monday. And then there's a 0 to 75 on the 8th of June, which is a Saturday down at Lingfield. That's a fillies only handicap, but against the older fillies. So again, they're both opportunities. Sharp 5 at Lingfield should suit. The races are potentially far enough apart you could run in both. So I think it's very much a case of we'll enter at red car, and if we get decent ground and the opposition looks about right, it's probably a race we'll be heading towards. Expect a big field up there. They normally get quite a big field. They've got a big wide sprint track. Kind of just the way the races are framed, there aren't that many options. Obviously, like if I'm opening the programme book looking for a 0 to 75, so is every other trainer with a horse in the same category, and they're all going to enter there. So it could be a fairly competitive race, but look, we'll see. The options are a little bit limited in that respect. We've got that race, or we wait to Lingfield, or then on the 15th of June, getting even further ahead, there's a 5 furlong 0 to 75 at Leicester. So it's very much a case of enter, look and see. But there's no real reason why we wouldn't be running a red car. I don't think. I'm happy. At some point, we're going to have to take on the older horses, but I don't think waiting to take them on is particularly worthwhile at this stage. So
the intricacies, I suppose, and one of the advantages of looking at red car is because they do get big fields, so they will get a lot of entries. But when you've got a horse rated 73 and you're looking at 0 to 75, if you get a lot of horses rated 75 and 74 entering for the race on some of the smaller tracks where they may only get 10 or 12 runners, maybe there is a risk that she's just not going to get a run. So things like red car, we should be all right getting a run at red car.
Yeah. It would. there's enough racing at this time of year, and there's enough, big field sizes where if you're running in those almost the highest bracket that you can be, so we're 73, so that it is a 0 to 75, you should be getting a run. It's very rare that when it's when you're sort of 10, 12 pounds below the top level that starts being a problem, and certainly a red car. I don't know exactly what the field size limit is there, but I know we won a 19 runner race there last autumn over 6 foot.
They have 24, 25 some days for the 2-year-old trophy.
So, it's a big field, and it'll be a slightly different type of a race for Arishka in that respect. But look, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. But certainly, that's the target at this stage. We'll enter and see how we get on.
The Lingfield race, is that turf or all weather?
Turf race, which I think that's a sharp 5 furlongs there. There's a bit of a draw bias. It's you run downhill, which is not always ideal. So there's a couple of things about. I wouldn't be the biggest fan of Lingfield as a track as a whole, whether or turf, but again, it should suit her. But it's certainly not a race where if I thought we had a bit of a chance at Redcar, I'd be waiting specifically to go there, if that makes sense to anyone. But
even the way the races fall, and you get this better than me because I tend to work this out wrong, but the 27th of May is a bank holiday Monday, so theoretically, even if she was to go there and win, she would still be okay to get into the Lingfield race because that's the 8th of June and she would have been reassessed.
Yeah, so what would happen there is she would still be, whatever she does at Redcar on the Monday, she wouldn't get that. So the day after is Tuesday, so not that Tuesday. The following Tuesday, she would get her new mark. Now, the entries for the Lingfield race fall on the Monday after, so that's before she gets the new mark. So she's making the entry. The qualifying mark for your entry is your mark that you won off. But the weight that you'd race off would be your new handicap mark. So our qualifying mark to enter at Lingfield would be 73. But if for winning at Redcar or being second at Redcar, we got put to 75 or 79 or whatever it may be, or say we didn't do so well and we got dropped a pound maybe, that would be the rating we'd run off then at Lingfield on that Saturday. It's the sort of, it's in a way an ideal spacing.
Choice in looking whether she's handicapped in or out.
Yeah, and the races are far enough apart where 12 days, that's a perfectly feasible gap. And again, it's probably like with Bath the other day where where we didn't run, had you won or run well or whatever, and you were happy with the horse, you're going to make the entry and see closer to the time, is it a race I want to run in based on the opposition, and is it a race that, is the horse Arishka well enough in herself, has she come out of the way? So it just takes a bit of analysis on that front, but I think we would, we'll, in my head at the moment, I've sort of got, we'll make the entry a Redcar, we'll probably run, and then we'd probably be making that entry at Lingfield, or depending how we run, and then if not, there's the race at Leicester. Looking slightly further ahead and without going into detail, there's a lot of options in July, at the beginning of July. So there's just always a thought that you don't want to go mad in June and run 3 times in races that are maybe going to be, because what happens when you get more races of similar class, the fields tend to spread apart, as they did the other day when we went to Windsor. There were 3 races for a very similar group of horses, and the races tend to thin out. The opposition thins a little bit between each race because 2 or 3 will go to this one, 2 or 3 will go to that one, instead of all the horses that are likely candidates to win the race ending up in the same race. So it just we'd call it cutting up, would be sort of the terminology. But so just conscious that when you look at the program book and you see a little patch of races like that, you sometimes think, well, okay, I'm not going to decide which race I'm going to run in, but I want to have the option to be able to run our horse in race A, B, or C. And as it gets nearer and we've got the entries and all the information, and sometimes we will pick up the phone to another trainer and say, where are you running yours? And most trainers are pretty good about it. There's a few that like to be difficult. A couple of the bigger yards where they won't help anyone because they kind of they have enough horses where it's not. But most other people, actually, it makes more sense to help someone out because down the line they're going to want to help you out, or you're going to want a bit of help from them. And sometimes you'll say, okay, well, rather than trying to avoid each other, let's decide now which one you're going to go for and which one I'm going to go for, and we'll keep apart. We both fear taking on each other, and there's no point taking on each other if I decide I'm going to go to Bath and you decide you're going to go to Ripon, and we just leave it at that, rather than both run at Bath and leave the race at Ripon really easy for someone else to win.
No, of course.
It's all a little bit of judgment and stuff, but those discussions do take place occasionally, because everyone's trying to get their horses to win. So.
And there is that little glut. I think for all the obvious reasons and not wanting to put too much in folks' minds and stuff, but it is interesting looking at that little group of races where one of them's an apprentice race, one of them's a fillies, 3-year-old and above, one's just a 3-year-old and above open race, and you've got the 3-year-old only race. So although they're all in the band that we'd be looking at, and they're all 5 furlong races on tracks that should suit, they are all slightly different conditions attached to each one, which, you may want to not run against the older horses. You may want to, but then you'd get the advantage of running just against fillies, or you may want to steer your own.
So they're not the same races, but you have a multitude of options for your horse, and it just gives you more choice to pick. And that's where you don't want to be too premeditative about which race you pick to run in. You've got to,
of course.
You keep your option open. Whereas with this red car race, it's a case of we enter, we're probably going to run. However, if we look and we go, you know what, it's an overnight trip. It's taking on 20 horses. There's 5 or 6 that have got very similar form, or that one just won really well last week, and do we really want to take it on again? And you're thinking, well, then you might take the decision, and it's a different decision, and that's where, if the race was at Windsor and you didn't have another suitable option, you might say, well, okay, let's have a crack. But if the race is at Redcar and it's a fair trek for the horse, you might not, you'd be a bit more, and that's why people sort of look at things like, what the long distance traveller, and he's only sent one to Newcastle and things like that, because you will, if the horse doesn't run at Redcar, you've got to give it a gallop, but to keep the fitness right and everything. But whereas if the race is at Windsor, you think, well, it's not like we've got no chance, but we just probably, we'll need a bit of luck to win here. Then you take a view. Well, we'll go to the race course, and at least worst case scenario, we've had a good run round, and we're still in shape for the next run, rather than galloping them at home. So they're all the decisions that come into it, really.
How has she been since Windsor?
Yeah, good. Very happy with her. She did an easy piece of work on what day? Yeah, Tuesday. She did just sort of a gallop, really, with another horse that's he's a backward 3-year-old that's needed plenty of time, hasn't raced yet, and just really to keep him a bit of company and just keep her ticking over. Just did a nice easy piece over 5 furlongs with him, and then just trained as usual, and she'll probably do a little bit tomorrow. Again, at this stage, it's maintenance between races, really, rather than massive, pushing them a bit harder to she's fit, she's well. So it's just a matter of just keeping fitness at the right level. So she'll probably do something tomorrow or on Tuesday. Just need to sit down and work a few things out backwards from the 27th. But it might be a case that it's better to wait for Tuesday, and then that's us set up for the 27th quite nicely. But no, none of it will be particularly groundbreaking stuff that we're doing.
No, so you know what you're doing. So it's whether it's you just need to crack on as you see fit. I think it's the 27th looks like. I think the only thing that I would look at there from my limited past experience is that if Redcar didn't become the option, it's then 12 days till the Lingfield race. Say if the ground was to go wrong or there was an issue as to why we decided not to go to Lingfield, or she ended up with a horror draw and the race was just a complete write-off, you're then looking suddenly we're a month down the line and everything else is there. But equally, it could fall right and, she could go and win well at Redcar and you're looking in naught 80s all of a sudden. So it's I think the programme does dictate things a little bit in the near future where, as you say earlier, there's going to be a lot of trainers with horses of similar profile to Arishka, whether they're rated a little bit higher, whether they're rated a little bit lower. So I think there will be. I'd be very surprised if there's not a high level of entries at that race at Redcar.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I could probably write you a list now, and when you see the entries, it'll be there'll be no real surprises in the group of horses entered in the race.
Right. You know now that the likes of Richard Fahey, David O'Mara, Roger Fell, Keith Dalglish, they're all going to have horses that are looking to run 5 furlong 0 to 75s, and they're all going to want to go to Redcar. Just a case of whether they're ones starting the year and they're not in form, or ones who are regressing, or whatever. But they're good. There'll be plenty of them kicking about.
And I think a horse like the Tomahawk Ridge, I think that'll be in the race. Wise words of James Tate that won the Newcastle race. That'll probably be there. The horses that ran at Beverley that finished the first 3. I suspect that most of those will all be in there. And this race will be really like, okay, it will almost be a test of which of those races was the
best form,
the best piece of form. We can't know that now, and we'll find out when they all run against each other, because certainly horses from all 3 of those races will end up in this race. It's almost.
I think it'll probably take another bout of equine flu to stop Stuart Williams entering October in the race, because he seems to have won some sort of golden ticket which allows him into that horse every day for as many races as he wants to, because I've never seen a horse entered as often as in my life as what that horse gets entered.
So Stuart would be a very astute trainer, and his mode would be to enter almost anything that the horse qualifies for, and assess the form and run it if he thinks there's a chance. And I don't know what I don't know how he works with that particular owner, but Stuart, he's a fairly clever placer of his horses, and there's lots of angle. I mean, that horse has dropped down a little bit now, so it qualifies for some slightly different types of races as well. So, I mean, you can enter. I mean, there was a 0 to 85 at Ayr that we talked about before that closed a couple of days ago, and I didn't look at the final entry yet, but there were not that many horses entered, and it would have been easy enough to pop Arishka in there and take a look, but we probably would have gone, we won't go there, and it's another entry fee, and you can very quickly spend a lot on entry fees in races you're not running in if you're not careful, and there's a balance to be struck.
No, I'm well aware of how quickly entry fees can suddenly start tutting up, but I think we're quite I don't think we do badly, actually. I think that the trainers that crowd used to work with, I'm not just saying this because you're on the other side of a screen, but we don't do badly for entry. We don't have many wasted entries, I think is probably the right phrase I'm looking for. At least not what I don't think we've ever had a frivolous entry. And I know there are some trainers out there talking to some guys where, as you say, Stuart, and it is an approach that works for a lot of horses and a lot of owners, where it's a case of you never know, you can't enter a race late on. You know, once the entries are in, you cannot enter. So if you don't enter, then it turns out there's only a small amount and that it's a weak field. If you're not in, you cannot run. So yeah, I'd be wrong to criticise him for that approach. It just makes me smile every time Bolton finishes enter for Goodwood next week, and there's 5 horses in that race that were in the race he ran in last time. It's what happens, isn't it? It's the next obvious race for that.
You're running in sort of, they effectively are like divisions, and you're taking on the same opponents. And if you win a race or two in that division or class, you go up a class and you have to take on some better horses. And if you keep getting beat in the class, your mark goes down and you effectively get relegated, and then you go down to a lower league. So, it's very much how the system works, and it's why it's difficult to make a plan for 3 months down the line and say, right, we're going to go and run in this race at, whatever track it may be, and do that, because unless you very specifically just want to run in that race and the horse is good enough to run in that race and do it, and then you race so that you're still in the right thing, and there would be people who do that, yeah, but you tend to do that with the higher grade horses, when you've got your well handicapped your sort of top handicappers, or your group horses and your listed horses, and you've got very specific targets. But then, whereas there would be, a 6 furlong 0 to 75 handicap every couple of weeks, or, maybe even every week in the program book, if you're talking about 6 furlong listed race for fillies, there's 5 or 6 of them a year.
Yeah.
So you're then talking about a different type of horse, and you're planning a little bit more specifically. And when we progress a horse up to that level for crowd racing, we'll be having a slightly different type of discussion.
But it's that whole logic, though, is how quite often, probably more often than what you'd imagine was going to be the case, you'll see these mid to low grade races won by the same horse 2 years running. Because the trainer wins the race, they know the horse can get in, they know that it likes the track, it knows, and they basically already look at that race for the following year, because it just becomes not an easy thing, but it's something they know. So why wouldn't they?
Yeah, and a lot of horses, there's not much difference between a lot of these horses, and they sort of need everything to be right for them, and whatever it is, something about that particular track suits them, and that distance and everything. So they know that all of that works. So you think, well, okay, when we sit down at the beginning of the year and we think, okay, roughly where are we going? What are we going to do with this horse? What does this owner want to achieve with this horse? And you say, okay, well, that's a race that we can then work back from. With Outrage, who we know is a good 5 furlong sprinter at Newcastle, when the programme books for the summer came out, the obvious target for him is a race at the end of June that's the Gosforth Park sprint over 5 furlongs. Whether he's quite good enough to win it, I don't know, but he's a...
Is that the Friday night meeting before the plate?
Yeah, and we know that everything works for him at that track in that place. So there we sit down and we say, okay, that's the race. That's a race where we know he can run well. What do we do in between now and then to learn a bit more, try and win something? And we look and we see, and there's a few options. But he's effectively an exposed horse, whereas Arishka is still improving and still developing. And we can set, there's a race at the end of July at Ascot that's, very much a nice race to aim for, because she keeps progressing. She'll have no trouble getting into it. and at the moment we're still on track. She's rated 73. It's a 0 to 85 for fillies, and we've got probably another 2 or 3 races before then. And if she wins one of those races, we'll go up, probably another £5 or £6, and we're suddenly, we're right there. We're sort of, 79, 80, running in a 0 to 85, so it's the right grade and the right thing, and that's how you pick a target like that. And that's why that race is a plan, and is something that we thought was worth, sort of flagging up and saying, well, this is the kind of race that we'd like to be aiming her at in the slightly longer term. But you wouldn't be as fixed on a race like that with a horse like her as you would a horse like Outrage, where you know exactly what you've got, if that makes sense.
And if Arishka goes and wins 3 races before that date in July, she can go for the Class 2 5 furlong 3-year-old race on the same day.
Yeah, exactly. You progress, and that's the nice. That's the nice thing about it is when you get a horse that starts doing well, your targets change, and sort of every time a horse runs, you let the dust settle for a couple of days, make some rough estimate of what you think is going to happen with the handicap mark, and sit down and say, okay, do we need to reassess the options, or do we still stick with what we had roughly as the plan for the next race?
Because as we all know, these horses are good at making fools of all of us, aren't we? Because after its first run, Hughie Morrison took Telecaster at the Derby and saved himself £1,100, and it's now going to cost them, what, 80 grand to put it back in?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, they probably won just about as much, enough to cover the supplement, but
it's still 80 grand.
Aidan O'Brien, who entered on racehorses in the Derby, never even entered. Probably what looks like his prime candidate, and Aidan would have more experience and more information at his fingertips than any trainer in the world, and he's done it wrong. So,
the point I'm trying to make.
They are growing, changing animals, and I think that's they're like kids. They all progress at slightly different rates, and some are smart.
It's unbelievably difficult. The Mark Johnson horse that won at Windsor when the day that Arishka was there, they got it back for £1,000 in the sale. It's beautifully bred, and they got it back for £1,000 because nobody wanted it. It was looking so backward and so wrong. That Summer Moon absolutely romped up at Windsor, and it's in a big handicap at York today, second favourite for a massive amount of money, £1,000. I kind of mind off the top of my head what it is bred out of, but it's beautifully bred. It just, so whatever it was when it went through the ring, for whatever was wrong, didn't look right with it, or whatever wasn't there with it, somebody took a chance and they've hit lucky. There'll be 1,000 stories of the same where the horse has never even seen the racetrack because whatever was wrong has never come back. So, no, I think it's, what you're doing is 100% right, Dan. We'll go race at this stage, we'll go race by race. There's no point fixating too much on Ascot. It's a great target to have. But what I would hate to happen, and I'm pretty sure it wouldn't happen in reality anyway, but if she ends up doing well but not quite well enough to go to this Ascot race, I don't want it where the owners are then feeling disappointed because that she hasn't made what was a target. Because I think a target's probably too strong a word for it. I think it's a potential rather than a target.
As Aidan O'Brien's fond of saying, it's a definite maybe.
I can take that. I can take a definite maybe. But so I look at a red car, possibly red field, and then back of the mind there is the Friday at Ascot, but if she makes it there, then it's phenomenal. But we wouldn't be going there to make up the numbers. We'd be only going there if we felt she was in the right grade and she was going to be competitive.
Yeah, and I think you always need to be feeling that you're going to be somewhat competitive in a race. And there comes a point with any horse where you may be because of the way the system works, you end up in a grade that you kind of have to. If you end up rated 83, well, you have to run in the race, and you might not be good enough to win the race, and that's the nature of handicapping. And then you drop down, and then you can win. at the level that you won at before, and then that's sort of how the system works. But there's no point taking a 67 rated horse to run in it when it can't even win a 0 to 70 to go and run in a 0 to 85. But I hope, and I think with the progression that we've seen, and she's got a good attitude, and she's getting stronger, and I hope that we wouldn't be too far away from being competitive in that sort of race in a couple of months' time. That's still the sort of thing we're aiming for, and there's plenty of fun to be had by aiming for it.
No, definitely. I think it's good to have something in the back of the mind. It definitely, even as a definitely maybe, it is good to have it there. And I think it's, a red car. I think the track suits. I know some of the owners will be already looking at maps and figuring out A, where is Redcar, and B, how long does it take to get there, and there always is the preference to try and run her on southern tracks, but we've got to go where the best race is for the horse. We're never going to please all the owners, no matter whatever track we pick. There's going to be some people who can't make it, or just the wrong date or whatever. And as we've always said, we'll run where's best for the horse, not where's best for the owners, because we'll never please them all. It's just impossible when you've got a syndicate of the style that we have. So as long as the horse is doing well, that's got to be the main thing.
Yeah. No, and it's a bank holiday weekend, so whether that makes it easier for people, I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably going to make my life interesting with badges, but that's what I'm here for. But listen, as always, Dan, appreciate your time. And so the entry will be made on Monday. Is that right? Monday?
What are we? Monday the 27th, Tuesday, next Tuesday.
So we'll be able to have a look on Tuesday and see what the field's like, and we're gonna have a chat then.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay.
Have a great weekend. Thank you. Bye bye.